Well, good evening, friends. It is 7:30, and on behalf of the Henops River Circuit, I'd like to say a very warm welcome to you to our first of two webinars that we are running as part of the 7-week campaign against fear and violence that is the Methodist Church of Southern Africa is a part of. And the topic for tonight's webinar is exploring masculinities for the 21st century. And in a minute, I will introduce to you our guest panelist speaker. Just a little bit of housekeeping to get out of the way. The first is to say that there is a chat function that you can open up on your screen. And you will see that you have the option of typing something in the chat that is addressed to all panelists, in which case it will just come to myself and Siyabulela, or you can address a chat to all panelists and attendees, which will go to everybody. And so what I'd like to invite you to do is to send a greeting to all panelists and attendees. So pick that option and then just type a greeting saying what your name is and where you're from, which congregation or city or circuit, whatever you'd like, where you're from, just so that we are able to be aware of who else is a part of this webinar. Then the other thing to say is that there will be a time for question and response later on. In fact, we're hoping that most of our time together is going to be question and response. And you will see at the bottom that there is a Q&A icon which you can click on. And if you click on that icon, then you can type a question and that will come to me as and Siyabulela, and we will be able to put that question in a confidential way. So if you prefer your question to be confidential, then you can use the Q&A function, or if you'd like to put the question in the chat column, then you are also welcome to pose a question that way. As this is a webinar, there isn't the facility for the attendees to ask questions using video or audio, but you'll need to use your typing fingers in order to do that. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce to you our guest for this evening, Siyabulela. Siyabulela Jentile is an award-winning South African entrepreneur. He's a self-published author, and he is the founder and president of an organization called Not In My Name South Africa. You can find out more about them from their website, but Not In My Name SA is a civil rights organization. It's a social justice movement championing the Not In My Name movement. Siyabulela is a certified Obama Foundation leader. He's also a Mandela Washington Fellow. And it was his passion for human rights that saw him take a drastic decision to leave his job as an engineer and choosing to be full-time in countering moral degeneration in South Africa. Siyabulela is also a member of the Advisory Council of the United Nations Association UK's Together First global movement. And this is a coalition of over 150 NGOs who are committed to making the best ideas for global governance a reality. And so we really are truly honored to have Siyabulela as part of our webinar and as our input speaker for the webinar this evening. And we want to say a very warm welcome to you, Siyabulela. So before I hand over to Siyabulela, we're just going to open our webinar with a prayer. And so if you are a person of faith, I invite you to just join with me in prayer now. Let us pray. Loving God, we thank you for the opportunity to talk together in this way, to learn from each other, and to explore what it means to be a man and a human created in your image. God, I pray that as we explore, that your Holy Spirit would be a part of our thinking and our engaging, and that you would use this time to empower us to be salt and light in our world. And we pray this in the name and spirit of Jesus. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Sia now, and we are in his capable hands. So thank you very much, Sia, and I will mute myself at this point, but I will be responding, or I will be monitoring the questions. So over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Let me just check, because I had my earpieces disconnecting there. Am I still audible? Because on your side, the volume is a bit low. You can hear me properly, ne? Okay. No, that's fine. I'm happy. I'm happy. Thank you so much, Ian, for this opportunity. I'd like to greet everyone who's joined us this evening. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim. If you can hear me, then I'm happy. Yes, my name is Siyabulela Jentile. I am a young South African male, and so in 2017, 3 years ago, just over 3 years ago, I left a career in civil engineering to try and, be a part of change, be a part of lasting change that is positive, and one that is impactful, and one that is measurable. So I left my career in engineering to start an organization called Not in My Name, South Africa, which its initial, and the main goal was to sustain the Not in My Name movement, which has been a global movement, if you'd like, because it started in Delhi, in other countries as well. So we, the South African, chapter, but have recently, graduated, for the lack of a better word, from Not in My Name South Africa to Not in My Name International. And we open up our participation and membership to other countries outside the borders of South Africa, in countries such as Namibia, Uganda, and Sierra Leone. And we've got some friends as well in the United Kingdom who are assisting us in mobilizing for the Not in My Name campaign and movement. So yeah, we are the civil rights group that is responsible for the hashtag Not in My Name campaign in South Africa and now globally. And I need to say that, so I'm not an expert on the topics of masculinities, what it means to be a man. I think it's an ongoing discussion that we need to constantly have. And I really like to commend the Methodist Church as a very progressive institution of faith. I've had many encounters with the Methodist Church, different circuits, different churches of the Methodists that have invited us to come and have these discussions. And I really thank God for you guys, and I pray that you get the more power and strength to continue with these discussions, because our hope and cry as activists on the ground who are doing this work daily, we always say that where is the voice of the church? The voice of the church is missing. And I always get encouraged when we have people of faith-based institutions coming on board and saying, this is what we are doing, can you be a part of us? I really get encouraged, and I always try to support by all means. And my relationship with the Methodist Church has grown over the past few months because of these progressive conversations that are happening in the church. So I'm excited really to be part of this very important conversation about a very, very important topic, which I think all of us should be having in all our spheres of influence at all levels of the society. I'm excited because it's a topic that speaks to manhood and men in general. And I believe that as a man also, I need to be part of these discussions and learn and unlearn some of the things that I've been taught and some of the things that I've taught myself. And some of them may have been toxic. I've had to unlearn. Some have been positive. I've had to relearn and make sure that I become a better contributor to the society. But I'm also a bit sad. And by sad, I mean, I'm sad because once more, we find ourselves as, South Africans of all races and of all genders having a discussion around gender-based violence, around masculinities, around the politics of identity, around many other things, which these discussions are not brought by because we talk about them for the sake of having the discussions, but there's triggers and there's been cases that we've been seeing all over the country, and it's very sad that South Africa we have been labeled as the rape capital of the world, which is something I'm not proud of. Just last week, I was talking to a friend of mine from Tanzania after a presentation on the Obama Foundation webinar, that she was telling me about the problems in a country that they are censored. Communications is one of their challenges because they can't, they don't have that democratic right to speak against the government. And she said to me, yeah, but those are some of the problems that we have. But South Africa is worse. You guys are killing women. And I felt very bad as a South African man, and I couldn't even defend myself. Yeah, but you are right. We are killing women, and I'm really happy that we have these discussions. But I'm sad that they are based on what we do. So I've got a very limited time with you, and I just want to share a few things with you. And I thank Ian again for giving me this opportunity to come and have this brief discussion on masculinities and just to challenge the psyche of violent masculinities in South Africa and how that translates to, masculinities in the 21st century, what it means to be a man today in South Africa. So masculinity has been a field of academic inquiry for quite a number of years. It goes back to, I don't know how long, but it has been one field that has been, continually a challenge, continually investigated, and it's generally been a field of academic inquiry, as I said, and we need to break it down and understand in a layman's language what masculinity is, together with its contradictions and its complexities. Because sometimes we overlook the fact that when you say masculinity or masculinities, we assume that, people understand what you talk about. And when, actually they don't. So what masculinity is, or what masculinity refers to, it basically refers to what it means to being a man. And in our discussions, when we talk masculinity and masculinity and masculinities, some may ask, what do we mean by masculinities? As though masculinity, so obviously when you say masculinities, it's more than one. For example, the term, what does it mean, and what does it mean to different people? Because it means different things to different people. So there's different types of masculinities that I think it's important that I mention them and how they influence who we are and what we are in the 21st century, because there's a general belief that manhood or masculinity is static, meaning that it does not change. There is a standard way of being a man. And if you don't subscribe to that standard way of being a man, you are regarded as either weak, as gay, as this and that, right? And often those are wrong, and we need to call them out. So I always say when I speak that one form of masculinity which is very common and dominant is called hegemonic masculinities. So hegemonic masculinity is the dominant form of masculinity in the society. It is often dominant and it is aggressive, it is competitive, and it's powerful, and may even be violent to some other form of masculinities, because it subordinates women, but not only women, it also subordinates other men. So it manifests itself in the system of patriarchy. And we see this in our households when, boys will be boys. Boys are expected to be a little bit rough. Boys are expected to play with, harder toys. Girls are expected to play with dolls and teddies. And boys are generally, competitive in nature, and they're aggressive, and they need to be powerful. That is hegemonic masculinity. And we do these things not even aware that we're doing them. And so hegemonic masculinity manifests itself in the form of patriarchy, which is a system. And before I continue quickly, another term that is loosely used without maybe for some people understanding what it is. So what patriarchy is that it is a system that puts women, it's a social system, by the way. It's a social system that puts power or gives men power over women and other men. And it is important to say other men every time when I speak, because we need to realize that some of these toxic masculinities are also a danger to us as men, right? So patriarchy is a social system that puts men on the top of the social hierarchy, on the top of the societal hierarchy, while it puts women at the bottom. So it's similar to the issues of gender. And I always make this example that we've got this system of patriarchy. It's almost similar to that on race relations, whereby for years you've had a system that puts, in a South African context or in an American context, that puts the white Americans at the bottom. I mean, at the top of the social hierarchy, and puts the African Americans at the bottom. It's similar to that system whereby patriarchy puts men at the bottom of the social hierarchy and puts women at the bottom. So it relegates women to the bottom of the social hierarchy, and that is what it does. That is what it's all about. And unfortunately, the same system, it is sometimes perpetuated by women, knowingly and unknowingly. And sometimes, even though it gives power to men, it dominates and it victimizes men as well. So we need to be able to be mindful of those facts as we speak about this thing, because what this patriarchy does is that it teaches boys, as I said earlier, it teaches boys to be aggressive and girls to be submissive. And that has played out in many, many ways in the 21st century in South Africa, especially in the contemporary South Africa post-1994, whether it's in business, it's in politics, whether it's in, in all spheres of the society. You have men who think that for the mere fact that they are men, they've got right to subordinate or subdue or to abuse women. And I'll make you a quick example of one of the cases that I'm sitting at in my office. It's the one of the South African Football Association. The former deputy president of SAFA reached out to me, I think about 3 or 4 weeks ago. Then she related a story to me, how she was treated by the men. You'll remember, football is a South African, is a male-dominated field in South Africa. And she related to me how she was treated and subsequently dismissed without even due processes being followed. And she's the longest-serving female football administrator in the country. And that shows you how these toxic masculinities, which are often protected, outplay themselves differently in our society. So that is your hegemonic masculinities. It's most common, and it's aggressive, it's powerful. Then we have subordinate masculinity, which is very interesting. So Subordinate masculinity refers to ways of being men that do not live up to the standards of the society or the ideal standards of manhood, right? So this man does not meet the societal expectations of what it means to be a real man, right? You know, we use the term real man in daughter in my culture or Xhosa. So this type of masculinity is almost always dominated by the hegemonic masculinity. So it's always a victim to hegemonic masculinity, which always promotes heterosexism, right? So hegemonic masculinity always promotes heterosexism. What heterosexism is the belief that everyone is heterosexual or everyone has to be heterosexual. So, which means the hegemonic masculinity does not recognize the LGBTI community and their needs and their participation in the community. And the church, most churches have taken a stance on that, others have not, obviously based on, you know, the religious beliefs they've got, justifications, or rather the ways in which they relate to the LGBTI community. So this subordinate masculinity, it's almost always a victim to hegemonic masculinity, same way as females or as women are to masculinity in general. That is where you find, that is the category where you find your gay men, your trans men, men that are not, you know, traditionally perceived as real men. So those are subordinate masculinities. So we've mentioned hegemonic masculinities and subordinate masculinity. Now the third one, right, which I think is also very interesting, is complicit masculinity. So complicit masculinity refers to men who accept the rewards of hegemonic masculinity without defending the patriarchal system from which they benefit, or they are said to be complicit. So these group of men, they do not call out toxic masculinities. They do not speak out against the negativity that comes with hegemonic masculinities, but they reap the benefits thereof. But at the same time, they do not necessarily agree with the entire setup of a patriarchal system of which these hegemonic masculinities feed on. And in the 21st century in South Africa, we've got complicit masculinities. So these are a group of men who are sitting on the fence, right? Because by the virtue of being born male and or being born men, you are masculine in a way, to a certain degree, right? And I know that biologically there can be a debate about that even females can be masculine. It's you know, when you talk about your chromosomes and whatnot. But this is specifically about this group of men who are complicit masculinities, and they can be negative also. They can perpetuate violence in gender relations. Now, the last one I think is important to mention just before we have an interaction is what is called marginal masculinity. So marginal masculinities are very interesting in a sense that it's still they are still hegemonic in a way, but they appear only in exploited and oppressed groups. So they share the characteristics of hegemonic masculinities. They are domineering and they are often very, very violent. And that is what you get on hegemonic masculinity. But they don't have any power. These masculinities do not have any power to act in society. They are often discriminated on based on class, on race, ethnicity, their socioeconomic status, and you know, they for an example, a group of immigrant men may feel that they're marginalized because of their minority status. Another example could be men who are unemployed may feel inadequate because they cannot provide monetarily for their families. Thus then they always seek ways to prove that they are still men, to prove that they are real men. And these are very, very, very prevalent in the 21st century, especially in a country which has got a high number of unemployment, in a country that has got a problem of alcohol and drug abuse. You have these marginal masculinities, because a man would say, but this woman disrespects me because I've got nothing to put on the table. I can't bring bacon on the table, and I feel like she disrespects me. And the only way for me to exert force on her, or to remind her that I'm still the man of the house, I need to be physically engage her, which then becomes a problem. And we know this because men have historically played the role of guardian, warrior, provider in a woman in human communities. Largely, due to their biological makeup, men are larger and physically stronger than women, and women, on the other hand, would play a different role. So to understand these masculinities in South Africa, especially in the 21st century, we need to understand that masculinity as a biological makeup is not a problem, right? The problem is toxic masculinity. And these are some of the discussions that I always drive across, that we must be very careful not to demonize masculinity, or not to demonize what it means to be a man. Because I believe that one of the most beautiful things that God has ever created was a man. And I believe that man was made in the image and the likeness of God as well. So once you start demonizing a man, then you start demonizing God himself. So I always say that the problem is when the masculinities become toxic. Toxic in a sense that they become a burden to the society. They become violent. They rape, they kill, they steal, they destroy, they do this and that. That becomes a problem. So it is not wrong, or it is not a sin to be a man in the 21st century. It is wrong to be a violent or a toxic man. So there are many reasons, and excuses for violence amongst men, mainly being civic, meaning they are located within the context of social, economic, political, and moral nature of our societal makeup. And to discuss each one of them individually would need us, to have some more time. So you've got alcohol abuse, you've got unemployment, you've got sex, stress, depression, the role of the apartheid legacy in the South African context, the media. You also need to look at that if you want to understand what is going on in South African masculinities. I always observe when I'm watching some of this, when I get to watch TV, because I hardly watch TV, I would always pick up that, how men are portrayed: strong, powerful, violent, manipulative. So that is the role that the media plays, and it's very dangerous because our young boys are watching, and for them, those are some of the positive role models that they want to look up to, that they want to be like. So just before I open for interaction, I want to say in conclusion that masculinity and femininity, or in relation to femininity, they refer to different feelings and different behaviors expected of both males and females at a particular time and a particular place, and it's largely a product of sex role socialization. So such socialization has been accomplished in many ways, many of which are unintended. As I said earlier, some are unconscious, some are. And in many societies, men are rewarded for being aggressive. Men are rewarded for being competitive and career orientated. Yet girls are required to be gentle and homely. And that is what patriarchy teaches us, that men have been trained to be direct and command. Women have been trained to obey, to serve and get their way through manipulation. And those are still relevant even today in the 21st century. Men are rated according to their career advancement, while women are evaluated by their domestic skills. So in many ways, men and women have been socialized to feel differently about themselves and act differently. So there is ample evidence on the sex role stereotypes and how they are still alive even today. So in almost every work activity, men are judged to be more competent than women, and this happens especially in corporate South Africa. A number of studies show that when women are successful, it is likely attributed to luck or great effort, while men's success is often attributed to ability. So Ian, I'm going to allow you to mute me again to open for interaction, but just also to say lastly that no legislation can achieve genuine gender equality unless there are changes there are changes in ways in which men and women are made to feel about themselves. And changing these sex role stereotypes is not going to be easy. Our institutions, for instance, are saturated with sexism, which is deeply entrenched with tradition. And most of our policies, especially in the workplace, have been based upon the assumption that men's career interests are primary and enduring, while women's career interests are temporary and secondary than other interests. And I always say to people that I'm a social constructionist. I believe that everything we see today is a result of socialization, and how we're going to change masculinities for the positively in the 21st century. It's if we change the way we socialize our boys. And I was making these differences or this contrast between men and women. I was making them in order for the men who are here and listening to be aware of this patriarchal system that gives us privilege over our female counterparts, and that we become better men and we socialize our boys better. We socialize them better. We teach them that, it is okay to cry as a boy, that we can no longer continue raising men of steel, as we call themselves in our men groups, in our churches sometimes, in our men's whatever, as we call ourselves men of steel. I believe that we need to do away with the men of steel. We need to build the men of character, the man that is fragile, the man that is able to break, and the man that is soft enough to cry. We need to do away with the men of steel, and in such a way that a man of emotion can rise up, a man who's able to express himself and express his emotions and his sadness and his head in that manner. So I really wish to thank you for this opportunity, and I hope that we can start interacting based on what I've just said. Over to you, Ian.
Okay, thank you very much, Sia. It's just really helpful for us as we think about masculinity. Sorry, let me just turn my video on. There we go. It's very helpful for us as we think about masculinity to have these four categories of hegemonic masculinity and subordinate masculinities and complicit masculinities and marginal masculinities, just to give us a framework as we think about masculinities for the 21st century. Just to say to all of those who are attending that now is the opportunity for you to type any questions or comments that you would like to make to contribute to our conversation. There are two ways in which you can do that. You can type your question in the chat column, or you can click on the Q&A icon and you can type your question there. If you would like to, that also honors confidentiality if you'd like to, and I will then put that question to Sia, or Sia will read it himself and respond to it. So while you're just thinking about your question, or while you're typing your questions, Sia, I wanted to just ask you a question about somebody who says, look, you know, we hear all this thing about gender-based violence. I have never raised my hand to another woman, and I never would. So this you know, I however consider myself to be the head of my home, and my wife is happy to submit to me, and I really don't see that as being a problem. How would you respond to somebody who said that? He said, look, I'm not part of, you know, I've never been violent myself, so therefore I don't know why you are raising this as something for conversation. Okay, you can unmute yourself and I'll mute myself there. Thanks, Sia.
Okay, thank you so much, Ian. You're asking a very important and powerful question. Look, different people lead their lives differently, right? And that is okay. And your question always comes in our debate, especially with, you know, the other colleagues in the feminist movement. And there's women who are happy with the arrangement in their households, and men who are happy with the arrangement in their households. And I personally, I'm happy with that. And you know, if both men and women believe that, you know, the man is the head and the woman is the neck, or the man is the leader or the woman is a follower, based on whether it's a belief based on religion or what they believe in spiritually, for me that is fine, and I support that. You see, the problem becomes now when the other is forced into submission, or the other is forced into dominance. Then that for me becomes a problem. I believe that we live in a democratic country that allows everyone to, you know, to do what works for them. But we need to look at it at a broader context that says it cannot be about me, because I'm sitting here and I'd say to you, I'd never laid hand on my wife or on any lady, but that does not absolve me as a man in South Africa today from taking a stand or participating in the fight against gender-based violence. So it's fine, I can be the head in my house and treat my wife like a queen, and she is happy with being the neck or whatever, but the conversation needs all of us. And every time when I speak, I always say that it is time for South African men to take collective responsibility. So whether you're an abuser or you're not, whether you believe in being a head or not, whether you believe in the institution of power relations or not, we're at a stage whereby each and every man in South Africa need to take a stand against gender-based violence, or violence against children, for an example. It then becomes central to our collective effort to say that it is no longer about me and my wife, or me about and what I believe in, but it's important because it involves common good, and you know, it involves the collective. So for that, I need to sometimes, you know, if there's nothing wrong with me and my family, the setup is fine and we're all happy, but we need to advance the conversation for the sake of the collective. That's what I believe in.
Okay, thanks very much for your response here. We've got two questions in the Q&A section and then also in the chat. So let's start with the Q&A. Okay, that's 3 questions now. So yeah, I'll just read them out so that everybody can hear them, and then perhaps you can just respond to those 3 questions. So the first is, what are some practical ways in which we can teach or socialize our boys to find value and identity in their character instead of in their accomplishments and their skills? So this person is just asking for very practical ways in which we can do that. Then the second one is similar. It says, how do we socialize boys when the men in their lives are not living the change? Who and how do we start the alternative socialization? And then somebody else has said, surely even though if my wife accepts my patriarchal thinking, it can't be right to lord it over women anywhere. So perhaps you want to respond to the first 2 and then the third one. Then we've also got a question from Smanga asking, in what ways media perpetuating gender-based violence, and how can we assist in streamlining it to fall in line and assist instead of exacerbating the situation? Just to also to note the comment from Gerard that sometimes our workplace can make us a person we don't want to be. Well, I've lost that comment now. And that we become 2 people, 1 person at work and 1 at home. So I'll hand back to you, Sia, just to respond to those. Thank you.
Okay, I'm back on. I'm back. Can you hear me? Okay. Look, as I said, this is obviously supposed to be interactive, and I can say things that people are not agreeing to, and I'm perfectly happy to, as I said earlier, to learn, to unlearn, and to relearn. So I always use these spaces to sometimes to have a look and interrogate my own prejudices and my own beliefs that may be toxic, that I'm not aware of, and just to try and change where I can. But one of the questions that was asked, and I'll try to answer in no particular order. One of the questions that was asked was around media, right? And I did say when I was speaking that, well, I don't watch much of television, but when I do, what I've always picked up, how media sexualizes women, or how it objectifies women. You know, you'd have women. Women are always almost half naked, whether it's in music videos, whether it's in the entertainment industry. You know, you have women half naked. You have women being objectified sexually. You watch a music video, for an example, a man is fully dressed, surrounded by 7 women who are only in their underwears. When a young boy is looking at that, something says to them, as a man, that is me, right? I'm in charge, and women are supposed to cater to my interests. Women are supposed to cater to my to my demands. That is wrong. And there's almost always that element of a man as also in media. A man is, you know, you get that man who's big, tall, dark, handsome, with a 6-pack, with a 6-figure salary. That says also to a young man that if you do not reach these standards of manhood in your life, then you are not a real man. When I spoke about subordinate masculinities earlier, and you look in media does not relate or does not speak to subordinate masculinities, right? So because when a young man is watching, whether it's a television show, a movie, or whatever, and they're looking at all these men, right? Well, some do, but I'm talking about mostly. They start picking up that, you know, they do not meet the society's expectations of what it means to be a man based on what they are watching. And those are some of the ways in which media and perpetuates stereotypes and perpetuates gender-based violence. So there's many other ways in which, look, you look into radio, right? For an example, one thing I've picked up also in South Africa, you'd have the main presenter being male, and the supporting, or the show would have 2 or 3 other people. They're likely to be women, right? I don't know if any one of you has picked that up. So you'll have a show, whether it's DJ so and so, then there's always these 2 women who are always supporting. They're always, you know, throwing in comments here and there, and they're giggling at the back, they're laughing, yeah. And then you pick up that, you know, but this is wrong at so many levels, because sometimes, you know, those women are actually capable to be co-hosts properly, or they are actually, you know, capable of being hosts themselves without, you know, the men being a part of that. So those are some of the things that I've picked up that media perpetuates, and not only in the mainstream media. You see it also on social media. How violence outplays itself on social media today. You know, how the women would be dragged, or women would be judged for the way they dressed, or you are asking for it, you are attracting unnecessary attention, you are going to be raped because of what you are wearing. So media plays at different levels and in different ways. Media plays a role in perpetuating gender-based violence. And the conversations that we have as men in our spaces are often very toxic. And some of these spaces that we have these discussions are on social media. We socialized, we circulate videos of naked women, pictures of intimacy that, you know, maybe my girlfriend would have sent me something, then I circulate it to the other guy, and then it goes around through our networks, and that is wrong. So those are some of the things that perpetuate gender-based violence from media. So media plays its role in a different way at different levels, whether it's social media, whether it's mainstream media, and otherwise, right? And then another question that was asked was around practical ways in which to socialize boys. One of the programs that we have at Not In My Name is that, so we'd take boys to camp, right? So would have camps for boys only, would have camps for boys and girls. Well, obviously, because of resources, we can't keep them there for long. So what we do is maybe we just take them for the entire day. Take them for entire day to Henops, then they just go and hike, right? And they hike, they get to the top, you know, they start building beggars, for an example. You know how it's said that the men don't cook. The kitchen is a place of a woman and things like that. So we take them there, and then when they get there, say, no, guys, you're going to make your own food, right? You are teaching them that a man must be able to make his own food. And then we've got what we call creating a beggar. Then they would create their own beggars. Then after that, we ask them, what did you guys learn from this? But if I'm hungry, I can make my own food, right? But why is it a problem at home for you to make your own food? No, but at home, my mom makes the food, my sister does this. And then we start teaching them from there to say that, you know what, even if your mom or your sister does make the food, you need to be to have an understanding that a woman's place is not in the kitchen. You also have got 2 hands. You can do your own food. You can make your own food, your own breakfast or whatever. So these boys are teenagers, most of them. So they're in the right age to be able to make their own food. So I'm just making that example as one of the practical ways in which we can re-socialize our boys. But secondly, we need to have continuous dialogues with boys. One of the programs that we do is called Men and Boys in Viso. So what we do there is we pair a boy and an old man, right? And we have discussions amongst ourselves as men and boys. So what we do is, at some point, we give these boys a chance and say, ask these old men whatever you want to ask them. and they would have that opportunity and the safe space to do it. So those are at a program level with institutions or with organizations, but on a daily, you need to affirm your son as a father. You need to, and your son does not necessarily need to be a biological one. Affirm them, tell them that they do not need to be strong in order for them to show that they are men, or that they are boys, or they are real men. Tell them continuously that, what, son, you can still be a man and still be understanding and be compassionate and be cooperative and be a team player. You don't necessarily need to always be competitive, always be aggressive. Destroy those stereotypes as young as they are. So they can never be a manual, honestly, because as I said, masculinities are different and our children are different. But what is important is that for you as a father, you always need to be there. And another important thing that I think is important to mention is that you've got mothers who are raising boys. I don't know if we've got mothers here in this platform. You've got mothers who are raising boys. You need, and I've observed this, you need also to encourage our boys. You know what happens, especially in the Black communities, when mothers are angry at their boys, they always say, you're a failure like your father, you are so and so like your father, you'll never amount to anything like your father. And when you say those things to these boys, they become, you are planting a seed in their hearts and in their minds, and that is wrong. That is why we say that in those spaces, we don't want anyone to come and say men are trash there, because these boys, we're trying to tell them that they can be positive men who can, contribute positively in the society. You cannot come there and tell them that they are trash. That is not going to work. That works in another platform and in other spaces, if it does really work indeed. So those are some of the practical ways in which we can re-socialize our boys. But the most important thing also is to say that we need to continuously learn. But also we need, as I mentioned when I started, to relearn and unlearn some of the things. When I started this work, there are things that I thought were right, but later to pick out, no. I thought this was right, this is not right. And we need to equip ourselves as we grow. Because children learn by watching, not by listening. So you can say all you need to say, but if your actions are not changing, they are not going to listen to you. So that is the most important practical steps, is being the change that you want to see in your boy's life as a man, or even as a woman, for that matter. I think I've spoken to the socialization as well as the media. I don't know if there's any other question that I'm missing, Ian.
Yeah. So we've got one new question, and then perhaps another question which I mentioned, which you didn't speak to directly. So let me give you the new question first, and that is: are we saying patriarchy needs to end in this modern society? So that's the question, and then the other one was a response to something you said earlier. A response to your response to my question, where somebody said, surely even if my wife accepts my patriarchal thinking, it can't be right to lord it over women anywhere. So yeah, just those two questions. It'd be lovely to hear your response to those.
Yes, sure. Okay, let me start with that one of that was a response to a response about when someone says, if my wife accepts patriarchy or dominance, it doesn't make it right. And it doesn't. I agree with you. That is why I said when I started answering the question that people live their lives different, and what works for family A may not necessarily work for family B. So remember when I said patriarchy is a social system that puts women at the bottom of a social hierarchy and puts men at the top. So even if the wife is aware of it and accepts it, it doesn't make it right. I'll make you an example. My mother was a typical, rural Xhosa woman who never went to school. But my father, on the other hand, did get some education, and he was able to work and earn a living. So my mother lived her entire life depending on my father, right? And I think she was aware that, you know, the system wasn't working for her, but she didn't have much of a choice. And that didn't make it right. And I think that some of the experiences that influenced how I think about this whole patriarchy system thing. But yes, it's true. It cannot be right because it's acceptable or because it's accepted by the wife, and we need to you need to constantly challenge it. And if possible, we need to change the minds of many men, as many as possible, because the system has existed for so long because it has been supported by women at some stages. You know, I was part of a dialogue in Durban early last year around April, and I was shocked. I was shocked of the responses that the women, they would said to us, you know what, this gender equality thing is not going to work here. Laina indota intogo, meaning the man is the head, the man is a leader, and there's absolutely nothing you can say about it, right? So those people are aware of the dynamics of the power dynamics in their relationships, but they've accepted them, and there's nothing that they want to do or they want you to do about it. But still, that doesn't mean it's right. So what we can do, unfortunately, is to make sure that these patriarchal systems, they do not become violent to such an extent that people end up being killed by their intimate partners. People end up being raped and being abused. On the other question that you mentioned, was the comment about whether patriarchy needs to end or not. I said when one of the comments that I made was that how did I say that men have historically, you know, men have been historically being understood to be biologically stronger and physically stronger than women, and that is why they play the role of guardian warrior in human communities. And even in other animals, if you observe closely, you'll see that the male, you know, would go out and hunt, and then the female would stay back and you know, nurtures the children and do. That is the same with human families. But this question is very, very interesting, and it's very, very complex, because patriarchy at a bigger scale, it's not serving anyone. It's only serving men and their interests, right? So personally, I believe that patriarchy needs to end, and as any system, it needs to be dismantled, right? Any system that is based on the domination and the oppression of the other person needs to be it needs to end. That is the personal belief that I hold, whether it's white or black supremacy, or whether it's in gender relations. Whichever system seeks to build itself on the oppression of the other needs to end. And that is my genuine belief with patriarchy. I believe that it needs to end because it is a system that is based on the oppression and domination of others.
Well, thank you very much, Sia. We've just got a 1 or 2 minutes left. And so what I'd like to do at this stage is to give you a space to have a little commercial. I mean, I was very interested to visit the Not In My Name website in preparation for this webinar today. For people who would ask the question, what can I do to support the work of Not In My Name SA? Could you just give us 1 or 2 or 3 ways in which those who want to would be able to partner with this organization?
Sure. So we are open to partnerships at any level, with any organization. So Not In My Name is not only doing work around gender-based violence. We also have got other programs such as rehabilitation programs, where we've partnered with several prisons in and around Gauteng, as well as other provinces. So you can get in touch with us. Also, maybe if you'd like to support our food relief programs as well as water relief programs. For an example, in December 2019 and January 2020, we delivered over 150,000 liters of clean drinking water to the community of Hammanskraal, right? So that has got nothing to do with gender-based violence. It's just a social, human, basic human right, clean drinking water. So there's a number of programs that if you can keep in touch with us, whichever one you feel you can relate to, you can assist. We work with a number of shelters that take care of battered women. We also connect a lot of people with professionals that they might need, whether it's psychologists. So if the psychologists here who may be willing to assist some of the victims, pro bono or otherwise, social workers as well. We work with a lot of social workers. So the assistance that we require as an organization are not only in terms of donations to move the programs, but also in human capacity, in skills. We need those. We need professionals to come on board and help us help the people who otherwise cannot help themselves. Another thing that we do, which is a lot of people know us of, and it's a lot of people think that's all we do, because they'll see not in my name people outside court with placards chanting justice for so and so. That is just a small percentage of the work that we do, but also those people need help, because most of them, their cases and their stories may have been neglected by the criminal justice system. So we need to be out there on the ground and try to support them. So we are a non-violent social organization. We abide by non-racial and non-gender principles, and we are not affiliated to any political party. So we've had programs whereby we worked with the ANC, other programs we worked with DA, in other programs we worked with the EFF, the ATM, we have worked with AfriForum, especially in the program of Hammanskraal. We have worked with, this Mandela Foundation and others, this and that. So whatever advances human life in our country and outside the borders of this country, we are able to partner. We are a social movement, and we do not only focus on gender-based violence. So we are on all social media platforms, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We are there. Our email is info@nimsa.org. And you are free to share my number with anyone who would want to keep in touch.
Okay, thank you very much. So just if you didn't get that email address, it's info@nimsa.org. So NIMSA stands for Not In My Name SA.
Yes,
I think that's your web address as well. NIMNSA. Yeah, so mine directly it's siya@nimsa.org or siya@siyabulelajentile.com. That's where I can be reached. Okay, thank you. Friends, just before we close, just a couple more things to say before I thank Siya. Just to say that this is the first of 2 webinars, and so next Monday evening we have our second webinar. And whereas this webinar was open to everybody but targeted specifically at men, next Monday's webinar is also open to everybody, but it's targeted more at women. And the topic of next Monday evening's webinar is breaking the silence and empowering those who suffer. So whatever media you found out about tonight's webinar, we'll be giving you information about next Monday evening's webinar. So it's looking at how we can make a difference in ending gender-based violence, in breaking the silence and empowering those who are suffering. And so I do commend that to you. The second thing to say is that we have recorded tonight's webinar, and we haven't yet discussed through what platform we'll make the webinar available. But if anybody is wanting a recording of tonight's webinar, then you can just drop me an email. There we go. Nicholas said that it's going to be on the Westview website. So westview.org.za, we'll post it there, and you'll be able to access the recording there. Siya, we want to thank you so much for your time. The attendees will not know that Siya had to excuse himself from another meeting in order to break away to be a part of this one. And we're very grateful to you for doing that. We grateful for your wisdom, but we're also very grateful for the work that you and the organization that you founded and
Sure.
head up are doing. It truly is exciting to know that there are organizations and networks that are doing the wonderful work that you are. So thank you for your time and for
Thank you, sir.
sharing your wisdom
Bye.
with us. We really appreciate it.
Bye.
Okay, bye-bye everyone. God bless you, and we'll see many of you back next week at next Monday's webinar. Have a wonderful